Welcome to the Menlo Atherton Writing Center's Writing Tips video series. This video is about basic quote integration and will cover how to easily integrate quotes into literary analysis essays and persuasive essays. When writing an analytical or persuasive essay, you will most likely need to use supporting evidence from sources other than yourself in order to support your thesis. In a literary analysis essay, you will analyze a piece or multiple pieces of fictional literature, so the quotes you use for supporting evidence may come from fictional pieces of literature such as novels, plays, short stories, or poems. In a persuasive essay, you are taking a stand on an issue and trying to persuade the reader of something. In persuasive essays, your supporting evidence will come from nonfiction sources such as nonfiction books, newspaper articles from historical or scientific journals, and other nonfiction sources. We are going to look at the standard way to integrate quotes into an essay, and various ways this can look. It is important to remember that when you are using a quote from a fiction or nonfiction source in one of your essays, you need to make sure the quote doesn't stand alone as a single sentence, or worse, as an incomplete sentence. When this happens, it is known as a non-integrated quote. It will make your quote seem disconnected from the rest of your essay and may affect the flow of your ideas and the essay as well. Remember, quotes must be introduced, have context, and be connected back to your topic sentences and thesis in order to be effective supports for your thesis. Before we begin, let us look at what a non-integrated quote looks like and provide some definitions and examples of words we will be using in this video to help you integrate your quotes. Here is an example of a non-integrated quote in an essay. To begin with, Gothic writers often incorporated dark imagery and diction into their literature to evoke mysterious and sorrowful moods. Once upon a midnight dreary, while I pondered weak and weary over many a quaint and curious volume of forgotten lore. As you can see, the quote seems to come out of nowhere. It is a standalone sentence that has no other context or ideas attached to it. We do not know who wrote it, where it came from, who said it, and what was going on when it was said. This is what you want to avoid. In order to avoid this, you should first provide a transition word or phrase to show you are transitioning to an example to support your thesis. You then should provide any necessary context for the quote, then a signal phrase to lead into the quote, and finally, add the quote itself. So what do we mean by transition words or phrases, context, and signal phrase? Let's take a look. Transition words or phrases help your essay move from one idea to the next, introduce new ideas, and introduce supporting details such as quotes. The words or phrases may be very simple. Here are some examples. For example, for instance, furthermore, in addition. Context means providing the background or circumstances of the quote, who said it or wrote it, when it was said, and why. Signal words or phrases are simple verbs used right before the quote to lead into it. The following are just some examples of signal phrases. Putting all of this together, an easy way to remember how to integrate a quote into your essay is to follow this simple quote integration formula. Transition plus context plus signal word or phrase plus quote plus MLA citation equals a good integrated quote. So back to our non-integrated quote. To begin with, Gothic writers often incorporated dark imagery and diction into their literature to evoke mysterious and sorrowful moods. Once upon a midnight dreary, while I pondered weak and weary over many a quaint and curious volume of forgotten lore. How do we fix this? Let's try using the quote integration formula we described before. Here it is as a reminder. That's transition plus context plus signal word or phrase plus quote plus MLA citation equals a good integrated quote. Now let's look at how we fixed it. For example, in Edgar Allan Poe's poem The Raven, the speaker sits alone in his study and opens the poem with dark and sorrowful diction by saying, Once upon a midnight dreary, while I pondered weak and weary over many a quaint and curious volume of forgotten lore. As you can see, we first provide a transition to show we are about to discuss an example to help support our topic, sentence, and thesis. We then provide context for the quote, which in this case includes the author, the title of the poem, and the character and what the character was doing when the quote was said. We then provide a signal word or phrase, in this case the words "by saying," in order to lead into the quote, and then we put the quote itself and the necessary MLA citation. In this case, these are the line numbers of the poem. Now let's look at different ways to integrate quotes using the quote integration formula. One way is by writing a complete sentence followed by a colon and then the quote. For example, in her book, These Are Some Dirty Rooms, Dana Seaweed explains the main way in which students contribute to classrooms becoming dirty. 70% of all high school classroom cockroach infestations are due to students eating and drinking during class time, which in turn leads to the spread of communicable diseases. Another way is by writing an incomplete sentence ending in a signal word or phrase, followed by a comma, and then the quote. For example, in her book These Are Some Dirty Rooms, Dana Seaweed explains that students are the main contributors to dirty classrooms, stating, 70% of all high school classroom cockroach infestations are due to students eating and drinking during class time, which in turn leads to the spread of communicable diseases. Another way is writing a statement that ends in that or a signal phrase, and then the quote. For example, in her book, These Are Some Dirty Rooms, Dana Seaweed explains that 70% of all high school classroom cockroach infestations are due to students eating and drinking during class time, which in turn leads to the spread of communicable diseases. Let's review what we have covered in this video. We went over how important it is to not let quotes from your sources stand alone in your essays. We then went over a basic way to integrate quotes into your essays by using an easy-to-remember quote integration formula. Transition plus context plus signal word or phrase plus quote plus MLA citation equals a good integrated quote. We then went over each part of the formula and covered 3 different stylistic ways to use it. I hope you found this video helpful. If you would like to review more advanced ways of integrating quotes, check out our video on paraphrasing and paraquoting. If you would like some more tips on essay writing in general, please check out our other videos. Thank you for watching.